In the middle of the night, a fire engulfed an old apartment building on the outskirts of a small town in Minnesota. Bright flames were devouring everything in their path. Firefighters had time to evacuate the residents, but suddenly they heard a faint meow. A small gray kitten appeared among the rubble with burnt fur and a desperate look. Alex, a young firefighter, grabbed it, carried it outside, and gently handed it to a volunteer. But as soon as it touched the ground, the kitten broke free and ran back into the fire as if something important was waiting there. Alex had joined the fire department just 3 months earlier, his boots still stiff from limited use, his helmet a touch too polished, his nerves still untested. Every morning, he arrived early and stayed late, eager to prove that he belonged, that he could carry the weight of the title firefighter. He studied drills obsessively, volunteered for every cleanup task, and listened intently to the veterans' stories, absorbing every lesson between their gruff words and silent stares. When the alarm blared at 3:17 a.m., the squad rushed to Dira. The fire was tearing through a 4-story brick building at the edge of the historic district, an aging complex that had withstood decades of storms but now glowed orange against the night sky. Smoke rolled above the rooftops, thick and unbroken. As the fire truck turned the final corner, Alex's pulse surged. He could see the flames licking through shattered windows, embers falling like red snow. This was it. This was where he would become more than just a rookie. As the team charged into action, hoses unfurled and axes swung through charred door frames, Alex was assigned to assist with sweeping the lower levels. The stairwells groaned under pressure, walls cracking as if exhaling decades of secrets. Through the smoke, he moved quickly but carefully, scanning each hallway and shouting into the void. Then he saw it near the remains of a collapsed bookshelf in what used to be a hallway closet, a small movement in the shadows. It was a kitten, barely larger than a hand, for scorched at the ticks and eyes wide with terror. The creature let out a rasping cry, more wheezed a meow, and tried to stand. Against every instruction, Alex dropped to one knee, pulled off his glove, and reached forward. The kitten didn't resist as he scooped it up, cradling it against his chest beneath the fireproof coat. He pressed in from all sides, but he didn't flinch. He turned back, retracing his steps with urgency, heart thudding not just from exertion, but from the strange weight of the life he carried. When he finally burst into the open air, steam hissed around him and someone shouted his name. Hands reached out to take the kitten, wrapping it in a towel as volunteers rushed forward. Alex gasped for breath, sweat soaking through his collar, a smile tugging at the corner of his lips. It was small, maybe insignificant in the larger picture, but he had saved something. Something alive. Something that mattered. The kitten squirmed in the volunteer's arms, its body still trembling from the heat it had just escaped. A second later it jolted free. Claws scraped against fabric and gravel as it darted across the pavement, ignoring shouts and outstretched hands. It didn't hesitate. In one fluid motion it sprinted toward the burning structure, slipping through the scorched door frame and vanishing into the smoke. The firefighters turned, stunned. Someone shouted for it to stop, a useless reflex against instinct. A few tried to follow, but the wall of smoke was thick and the structure was unstable. Alex stepped forward automatically, eyes locked on the doorway the kitten had disappeared through. His brain caught up a moment later, reminding him how irrational it was. It was just an animal. But then again, something in the way it had run, so urgent, so certain, gripped him. He remembered its desperate eyes in the rubble, its burned paws, the way it hadn't flinched in his hands. There was something more. He turned to the lieutenant. The older man was barking orders, keeping the rest of the crew focused on containment. When Alex reached his side and spoke, the response was firm and immediate. No one was going back in. The blaze was getting worse by the minute and the upper floors had begun to sag. But Alex couldn't shake the feeling twisting in his gut. He took a step back, hesitating for half a heartbeat, then pulled on his helmet and disappeared into the smoke. Behind him, someone cursed. Radios crackled. The lieutenant's voice shouted after him, sharp and commanding, but Alex didn't slow. The moment he crossed the threshold, the heat hit him again like a wall. Flames licked along the edges of the hall. He dropped lower to the ground, crawling through ash and broken glass. Visibility dropped to near zero. Somewhere inside, past the roar of fire, was the sound of something small and determined. It wasn't over. Not yet. Inside, the air thickened with smoke, and visibility dropped to almost nothing. Flames twisted up stairwells and along walls like living things. Alex dropped low, scanning through the gray haze with narrowed eyes. Every breath burned his lungs through the mask, every step uncertain across broken boards and collapsing debris. Somewhere above, a distant scraping sound cut through the roar, small, sharp, desperate. He turned toward it, navigating by sound alone as the heat clawed at his body. At the top of a half-burnt staircase, he saw movement, a flash of gray against the orange glow. The kitten reappeared briefly in the smoke, then darted away with purposeful urgency. Alex followed, climbing faster, the fire pushing closer with every second. The kitten led him along a hallway consumed by smoke, weaving around fallen beams and shattered glass. It stopped at the end of the hall, crouched low near a closed apartment door, its tiny body tense with panic. The kitten scratched at the wood, crying with urgency, not for itself, but for something inside. Alex rushed forward and grabbed the handle, twisting. Locked. He slammed a shoulder into it, but it didn't give. The door, scorched and swollen, was sealed shut by heat and age. Behind it no sound came, only the increasing crackle of fire pressing in from behind. He knelt beside the kitten, laid a hand on the doorframe. It was hot. Too hot. He tried once more, slamming it with everything he had, but the door barely shifted. The kitten kept scratching, refusing to move, its cries higher now, sharp and broken. A section of ceiling groaned above him, showering embers as a beam split and fell, crashing a foot away. The fire was too close. He couldn't stay. Every instinct screamed to run, but the look in the kitten's eyes held him, something more than animal panic. Something almost pleading. Still, the fire roared louder, and Alex made the call. He scooped the kitten into his coat and turned back. As he fled down the stairwell, the building trembled beneath him, smoke swallowing every light. He burst through the doorway moments later, collapsing in the grass outside, the kitten trembling in his arms, both of them streaked with ash and defeat. But in Alex's mind, something still twisted. That door. That place. That silence. Something was wrong. Alex stumbled out of the building, coughing hard, sweat dripping down his soot-streaked face. His helmet was askew and his voice cracked from the smoke. He pointed back toward the second floor, gasping out that the kitten had led him to a specific door. He explained that the animal hadn't been running blindly. It had been desperate, scratching at the door like something or someone was trapped behind it. The crew gathered around him as he spoke. One of the senior firefighters, already scanning evacuation logs, frowned and stepped forward. He double-checked with the dispatcher, then looked up grimly. There was one resident unaccounted for, a woman in her 70s, disabled, known to use a wheelchair. Her name was listed next to apartment 2C, the same one Alex had nearly reached before being forced back by the flames. The team exchanged tense looks. If she was still in there, time was already running out. Alex's heart dropped. Everything clicked at once. The kitten hadn't escaped by accident, it had come out to find help. It had returned into the burning building not because it was disoriented, but because it knew someone had been left behind. It had led Alex right to her door. His pulse surged with a sickening mix of urgency and frustration. The animal had tried to tell them something vital and he had almost missed it. He could still hear its small claws scratching at the door, a sound more urgent than any alarm. But the fire had worsened. The upper floors were unstable and smoke was pouring out of the windows in heavy waves. The incident commander shook his head, hesitating. The stairwell was likely compromised. Flames were beginning to reach the roofline. Declaring the interior too dangerous, he ordered all personnel to remain outside. Alex clenched his fists, eyes fixed on the second-floor windows. The silence that followed the command was heavier than the smoke. Every second stretched, echoing with the knowledge that someone still waited inside, someone who wouldn't last long without help. Alex didn't wait for permission. He met the eyes of his two closest crewmates, who had fought beside him in smaller blazes, and without a word, they understood. With a nod, the three of them surged forward into the collapsing inferno. The heat hit them like a wall, but adrenaline overrode instinct. Alex led, retracing his steps up the scorched staircase, each boot fall shaking soot from the trembling structure. Smoke wrapped around them, thick and clawing. Flames danced along the ceiling like living threads and visibility dropped to a ghostly blur. But he knew where the door was. He remembered the hallway. The smell. The kitten's cries. At the door, the wood groaned from the heat, splintering at the edges. Alex raised the halligan and struck. Once. Twice. The third blow knocked the lock free and the door crashed inward with a burst of embers. The air was worse inside. They found her crumpled near the far wall, motionless. A thin blanket still clung to her body as if she tried to shield herself. One of the men checked her pulse and gave a sharp nod, alive, barely. No time to wait. They hoisted her together, struggling to navigate around burning furniture and sagging beams. Behind them, the structure groaned with a sound like thunder. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Just as they turned, Alex saw the kitten again. It was nestled by her side, its small body pressed tight against her arm, licking her fingers as if trying to wake her. Its fur was singed, eyes glassy but unafraid. Alex reached down and scooped the kitten into his jacket with one hand while supporting the woman's weight with the other. The kitten didn't resist. It clung to him with tiny claws, body trembling but alive. The hallway behind them hissed with collapsing debris. The fire was no longer just a threat, it was consuming the building room by room, and the stairwell was seconds from failure. They moved fast. Down the stairs that groaned under their weight, through smoke that scorched every breath. The exit flickered ahead like a mirage. As they burst through it into the night air, the back half of the stairwell gave way behind them with a thunderous crash. Flames erupted from the doorway. But they were out. The woman in their arms. The kitten tucked in Alex's coat. The crew surrounded them, shielding them with blankets, masks pulled down over ash-covered faces. The medics rushed in. For a moment, all Alex could hear was the kitten's faint heartbeat against his chest. And then a shaky breath from the woman. Not a word. Just breath. That was enough. In the back of the ambulance, the elderly woman stirred. Oxygen hissed softly beside her, and a medic gently adjusted the mask on her face. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, until they settled on a small shape curled against her chest. The kitten, cinched but alive, nestled in the crook of her arm, purring weakly. Her fingers closed around its tiny body, and a tear traced a path down her cheek as she whispered that he was her only companion in the world. In that fragile moment, surrounded by flashing lights and urgency, she found something stronger than fear: connection. The story spread quickly. A fire. A forgotten woman. A kitten who refused to leave her behind. Local journalists swarmed the scene the next day, capturing photos of the small gray cat perched beside the hospital bed, now affectionately named Smokey. News outlets called him a hero. Social media lit up with praise and donations. Artists drew sketches, children sent letters, and Smokey's wide eyes became a symbol of loyalty across the state. What began as a local rescue turned into something larger, a tale of instinct, love, and the invisible threads that tie lives together. Alex stood quietly as the fire chief pinned a commendation to his jacket at a small ceremony held in the town square. The applause from his fellow firefighters and townspeople washed over him, but his eyes kept drifting toward the woman seated nearby, wrapped in a blanket, with Smokey in her lap. He hadn't acted for the recognition. He had followed a hunch, a cry for help hidden in the smallest of creatures. And now he was being honored not just for bravery but for listening to something that couldn't speak. In the weeks that followed, a local nonprofit helped relocate the woman to a new apartment, outfitted for her needs. Smokey settled in with her immediately, rarely leaving her side. Neighbors checked in daily, and the community that once barely knew her name now treated her like family. Alex visited often, never without treats in his pocket for the kitten who had taught him the most important lesson of all: real courage wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was quiet, small, covered in ash and fur. And sometimes it came with a heartbeat no bigger than a fist, refusing to give up. Sometimes the greatest heroes don't wear uniforms. They don't carry badges or rush into danger with sirens blazing. Sometimes they're small, trembling, covered in soot, and driven by nothing but love. The townspeople spoke of the fire for weeks, but what stayed with them longer was the image of a tiny gray kitten, fur-singed, eyes wide with purpose, leading a firefighter toward a locked door no one else would have checked. His paws were torn. His whiskers burned. And yet he stayed. People said Alex was brave, and he was, but even he would tell you he just followed the real hero. In a world that often overlooks the voiceless, that night proved something extraordinary. A creature without words can still cry for help, still protect, still save. They called him Smokey, but in every heart he touched, he was so much more than a name. He was the reminder that compassion knows no species. And sometimes to change a life or save one, it only takes a heartbeat of courage from someone no one expected.